the pro debut of Ben Whittaker. Now, Ben Whittaker has already started causing controversy among boxing fans in the UK. He's definitely a Marmite character, and most people appear to not like him, to not like his personality, the way he comes across. Very brash, a lot of showboating in the ring, fighting often with his hands down and doing little dance moves as he hits his opponents with shots. A lot of people don't seem to like it. Personally, I have no issue with that kind of stuff. A little bit of showboating here and there. I'm cool with it. I was a big fan of Muhammad Ali, of course, growing up. I liked his brashness and the cockiness and all that kind of thing because it was fun, But when it comes to charisma, I was having a discussion with a couple of people in my Element group. When it comes to charisma, that is not the same as just being brash and cocky and arrogant. They're two different things. Charisma and arrogance are not necessary. Well, they're not the same. You can be charismatic and arrogant at the same time, yes. But you can also be purely arrogant with no charisma. And a couple of examples, and I'm not trying to have a go at these people. I'm just telling you my view from my perspective. James DeGale was a guy like that. He was cocky and brash, but there was no real charisma there. And the way I define charisma is a magnetic personality. The kind of personality that just draws people. When you walk into a room, you're the center of attention. Everybody's got eyes on you. Everybody's listening to you. They're hanging on your every word. That's charisma. James DeGale, for my money, he never had that. He had arrogance, but he didn't have charisma. Muhammad Ali, of course, is the best example of a charismatic individual. Tremendously charismatic. You go back and look at him on all the, not just boxing interviews, but talk shows he had, like Parkinson and all this kind of stuff. With Howard Cosell, etc. He captivated the audience. He had them eating out of the palm of his hand. Do you know what I mean? Even when he was saying things they didn't like, he was able to win them over with his smile and his charm and all this kind of thing. Now, look, there are plenty of people who don't like Muhammad Ali, but there are loads of people who do, including myself. Right? I was absolutely mesmerized by his charismatic personality. So some fighters have that. I mean, Tyson Fury has charisma. I'm not saying he's got Ali level charisma, but he's definitely got charisma. Dylan White even has got charisma. And these are guys who are cocky and do trash talk a lot. They've got charisma. From what I've seen so far of Ben Whittaker, he had in interviews and so on, he hasn't shown what I would call charisma yet. Maybe, the more his career moves on, we'll see a bit more charisma. I don't know. But from what I've seen so far, there isn't really, I haven't seen that much charisma. It's just been arrogance. So, again, we'll see what happens. And when a fighter I was going to say that when a fighter has arrogance but no charisma, they could still make a good heel. In some instances, that may be true. But a lot of the time, a good heel also needs charisma. Do you know what I mean? A good heel also needs a bit of tongue-in-cheek, a twinkle in the eye, and so on and so forth. You just look at WWE wrestling. Some of the greatest heels have been funny with it. They enjoy playing the heel. I mean, a great example of a heel, of course, would be Chris Eubanks Sr. He loved playing the heel when he was going up against Nigel Benn and, all these other fighters. He absolutely reveled in the heel status. He played up to it. So, and again, tremendous charisma. Eubanks Sr., an eccentric character, yes, but tremendously charismatic, right, in his own way. So anyway, I'm getting lost in this whole discussion about charisma. Ben Whittaker, for me, the jury is out on whether he has charisma. And look, the only reason I raise this is because people are talking about the next generation of British fighters and they're wondering where the stars are going to come from. Because a lot of people don't see there being any obvious stars. Joshua Buatsi, I mean, he's what is he, nearly in his 30s at this point? Is he going to become a star? He doesn't really have a particularly spectacular personality in terms of his public persona. And in the ring, yeah, he's done the business, but he hasn't been like a wrecking ball. Do you know what I mean? Whereby nobody can ignore him. So you look at other fighters and eyes start to look towards the likes of Ben Whittaker. Does he have what it takes to be this star? And ultimately, the most important thing is the results. So if Ben Whittaker manages to become a world champion and so on, then perhaps he can become a star. But you often need more than that. You often do need charisma. And if you don't have charisma, then you have to go down the Anthony Joshua route of being super corporate, scripted, doing exactly what you're told, etc. And then they will turn you into a star regardless. I can't see Ben Whittaker doing that at this stage. Maybe he shouldn't have to. Although I did see an interview where he was talking about maturing more, and maybe not being quite as brash as he has been in the past, I guess, during his amateur days. So we'll see what happens with him. But all the charisma talk aside, I know you guys want to hear me actually talk about his performance in the ring. Like, yo, Hatman, why are you not talking about the actual fight itself? Okay, so the pro debut of Ben Whittaker. I saw a couple of his amateur fights, and this is when I learned that he was signing with Ben Shalom and Boxer, Sky Sports. Went and had a look at a couple of his amateur fights. Appeared to be a slick fighter who moves around, jabs, stays out of the way, and so on. In the pro debut here, yeah, there was a bit of movement, but he was up against a fighter who he clearly felt that he could hurt, a fighter who he clearly felt he was leagues and leagues above. So he wasn't quite as cautious here as I saw him be in the couple of amateur fights I watched him in, because they were against high-level opponents. Here, he was holding his feet here and there. He was letting big shots go. And, when it comes to his boxing style, he's hooked up with Javon Sugar Hill, or Sugar Hill Stewart, as he calls himself now. And the Kronk influence is already there to see. I'm not saying that he looks exactly like a Tommy Hearns or a Lennox Lewis or a Gerald McClellan at this point, but there is somewhat of an influence to be seen already. And I think that's a good thing. Because of his frame, he has a frame which is typical of Kronk fighters. Not that all Kronk fighters were kind of tall and wiry, because many of them weren't. I mean, you look at a guy like Dennis Andrews, for example. He was not your stereotypical Kronk fighter in terms of his build. I mean, Manny Stewart even worked with Evander Holyfield. He worked with Miguel Cotto later on in Cotto's career. There were lots of fighters that Manny Stewart worked with that weren't this typical Kronk, didn't have the typical Kronk physique. Let's just put it that way. But Ben Whittaker does have it. So I'm actually quite interested to see how he develops under Sugar Hill Stewart. I think it's going to be an interesting journey, and the punching power aspect is going to be especially fascinating to watch develop, because apparently in the amateurs he wasn't a devastating puncher. I'm sure he had some power, but he wasn't known as a knockout artist as far as I'm aware. Whereas with the Kronk, they like developing knockout artists. Yeah. So if anyone can help this guy improve his punching power and become a legitimate puncher, it's Sugar Hill Stewart. Bear in mind that Tommy Hearns in the amateurs wasn't known as a massive puncher, believe it or not. But when he turned over pro, they developed his punching power tremendously. Now, obviously, some of it is going to be down to just gaining your man strength and what have you. But at the same time, it's developing the technique. Punching power is predominantly technique and biomechanics more so than physical strength. There are plenty of guys out there who are tremendously physically strong, lift a house on the bench press, but you put them in the ring or even on a bag and tell them to punch hard and it's less than impressive. Contrast that with a skinny guy like Tommy Hearns or Gerald McClellan who'll knock down a wall with their right hand. Do you know what I mean? Because of the biomechanics and the technique, they just have the ability to turn their weight over much more effectively. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see Ben Whittaker's punching power develop as he moves forward in his career. And as you can see with the shorts, he's got the Kronk colors, although the Kronk fighters never used to have these tassels on the side. I guess that's Ben Whittaker's own little piece of flair that he's adding to it. He's got new money on the back. We'll see how far he can go, and we'll track his progression.